I moved to Maple Hollow the summer the amusement park reopened. It was one of those small midwestern towns that look sweet on postcards. Red brick downtown, hanging flower baskets, a single movie theater that still plays matinees on Sundays. Everyone said the park was the town's heart. Hollow Hills Amusement, they called it, though it sat at the edge of a drained lake and looked more like a scar than a heart. They'd shut it down in the late 90s after a fire on the carousel, but someone from out of town, a developer or a dreamer, bought it and promised to bring joy back to Maple Hollow. The townsfolk wanted that. Joy, jobs, nostalgia. I just wanted work. I got hired as a night custodian. The pay wasn't great, but I liked the quiet. I'd start my shift around sunset, sweeping popcorn and spilled soda under the neon glow while the last kid screamed through roller coasters overhead. When the gates shut, the music stopped, and the rides went still. It was just me, the crickets, and the faint hum of the old Ferris wheel. That first night, I remember thinking how strange it felt to be completely alone in a place built for noise. The air smelled like sugar and rust. The painted clown faces on the Midway games seemed to follow me as I worked. Every so often, the Ferris wheel lights flickered, even though the power should have been off. I told myself it was residual electricity, old circuits, nothing serious. Around 1 a.m., I heard laughter, soft, echoing, childlike. It came from the carousel. The carousel was the only ride still being repaired. Half the horses were missing, their poles leaning like broken bones. The ones that remained were sun-bleached, their eyes cloudy and cracked. I walked closer, broom in hand, and saw movement, just a shadow between the horses. "Park's closed," I called out, trying to sound confident. No answer, just the slow, mechanical creak of the carousel turning 1 inch, then another. The power was off. I'd personally locked the circuit box earlier. Still, the carousel kept moving, so faintly I thought maybe I was dizzy. But the music started next, that warped, tinny tune from old Calliopes playing slow and wrong, like someone remembered it imperfectly from a dream. I left my broom right there and walked out through the gate without looking back. The next morning, my supervisor told me not to worry. He said, "Happens sometimes. Power surges, ghost stories. Old rides remember things." That's when I learned Maple Hollow had a rule. Nobody stayed past 2 a.m., and nobody ever rode the Ferris wheel alone.
The next few nights, I tried not to think about what happened. I worked faster, kept my headphones on, pretended not to notice the flickering lights. Still, something about that park after midnight got under my skin, like the air itself was listening. It was on my 4th shift that I finally asked someone about the carousel. There was this old guy named Earl who worked maintenance. He'd been around since before the fire and looked it. Gray coveralls, hands that smelled like oil and cigarettes. I found him fixing a popcorn machine in the break room. "Hey, Earl," I said casually, "what's the deal with the carousel? Power keeps coming on at night." He stopped tightening the bolt and looked at me slow. "You heard it?" he asked. "Yeah, music and everything." He wiped his hands on a rag, eyes narrowing like he was deciding whether to tell me something. "That's the girl," he finally said. "The one from the Ferris wheel." I laughed a little, waiting for him to grin, but he didn't. He told me her name was Daisy. She was 11. The night of the fire, her parents were stuck on the Ferris wheel when the flames broke out near the carousel. The operator panicked and cut the main power, locking everyone in place while the ride burned below. They say Daisy slipped past the fence, ran in to help find her little brother, but she never came back out. The fire was ruled electrical. The park closed down for 20 years. When the new owner reopened it, they rebuilt everything, except the Ferris wheel. That one they just repainted. Said it was part of the charm. Earl swore the same car Daisy's parents were trapped in, carriage 9, still creaked like it had weight even when it was empty. I didn't believe him. Not really. But that night, I couldn't stop looking at it. The Ferris wheel was taller than any building in town. Its metal skeleton groaned with the wind, the lights pulsing soft and uneven like a heartbeat. Around midnight, I walked toward it, telling myself I just wanted to check the fence. My flashlight beam cut through the fog rising off the asphalt. That's when I saw her. A girl, standing under carriage 9, barefoot, wearing what looked like an old-fashioned white dress, the hem gray with dirt. Her hair hung in clumps, wet, like she'd just come out of water. I froze. She didn't move, just looked up, staring at the carriage above us. "Hey, you okay?" I asked, my voice cracking a little. She turned her head toward me, slow as a clock hand. Her face was pale, soft, but her eyes looked burned, like the color had been seared out of them. "Don't turn it off," she whispered. "What?" "The lights. Don't turn them off. They scream when it's dark." Then she blinked, and she was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just gone. The next morning, I asked Earl if he ever seen her. He didn't look surprised. He said, "Count yourself lucky. Most folks don't get a warning." I asked, "A warning for what?" He just looked out toward the Ferris wheel and muttered, "For when she starts riding again."
After what I saw that night, I tried to tell myself it was stress. I'd been working long hours, drinking too much gas station coffee. Maybe I'd hallucinated. But the way Earl said, "when she starts riding again," stuck with me. Like it was a thing that just happened sometimes. Like the town already knew. The next day I went looking for the Ferris wheel's control booth. It was a squat metal shack next to the loading platform, half buried in weeds. A sign on the door read, "Do not enter, electrical panel sealed." The handle was rusted shut, padlocked, but through the narrow window I could see an old operator's chair and a wall of switches, all labeled in fading white tape. Lights, main power, emergency brake. And one other switch, right in the middle, had been scratched out and relabeled in shaky handwriting. Daisy. That night, the fog came early, thick enough that I could barely see the game stalls past the cotton candy stand. Around 12:30, I heard the Ferris wheel creak, slow, deliberate, like something was climbing it. I killed my flashlight to listen. One rotation, then another. The carriages squealed as if under real weight, though the motor hadn't been used in decades. I crept closer. The air felt charged, humming through my chest like static. When I reached the platform, I saw carriage 9 swing gently, not empty this time. There was a faint outline inside, someone sitting perfectly still. I blinked, and the lights flickered once. When they came back, the carriage was empty again. I almost ran, but something about the control shack caught my eye. Its light, a soft yellow glow, was on. I swear that shack had been locked for years. I walked up, heart hammering. Inside, through the glass, I could see a man sitting in the chair. His back was turned, shoulders hunched. He was moving his hands, slowly flipping the switches one by one. Tap, click, tap. Each time he moved, the Ferris wheel groaned louder. "Sir," I said, tapping on the glass. No response. I reached for the handle. He was cold, like touching ice. The lock was still there, rusted solid. But when I looked back up, the man was gone. Just the chair slowly spinning. I stumbled backward, tripped over the rail, and hit the pavement hard. When I looked up at the Ferris wheel again, all the lights had gone out, except for one. Carriage 9. Lit from the inside, bright and gold, swinging gently in the fog. And then I heard it, faint but clear, a man's voice over the park's dead intercom, crackling with static. "Last ride of the night. Keep your hands inside the carriage and hold on tight." I didn't wait to hear more. I ran until my lungs burned, until the park gate clanged behind me, and even from the road I could see it, the Ferris wheel turning slow against the black sky, one glowing carriage circling higher and higher. The next morning, Earl found me sitting in my truck in the lot, engine off, hands shaking. He didn't even ask what I saw, just said, "You heard the operator, didn't you?" I nodded. Earl sighed, lit a cigarette, and said, "He was her father." After that night, I told myself I'd quit. I even typed out a resignation email. But every time I hovered over send, I thought about the way Earl looked at me. Not scared exactly, but resigned. Like he'd seen this before. Like everyone who worked there had. So I stayed. Partly out of stubbornness, partly out of curiosity. I wanted to know what really happened. There were 5 of us on night duty. Me, Earl, a security guard named Leon, a ride mechanic named Tessa, and a janitor in training, a quiet teenager everyone just called Milo. We all clocked in at sundown, worked until 2 a.m., and never, ever went near the Ferris wheel. That was an unspoken rule, like not saying Bloody Mary into a mirror. Still, sometimes I caught them glancing toward it, especially Tessa. She'd been hired to inspect the rides, but I noticed she avoided that one completely. When I asked her why, she said, "Because it inspects back." I thought she was joking until I saw the scars on her arm. Thin, vertical burns, like something electrical had kissed her skin. One slow night, around 11:45, Leon called us all to the security office. "You need to see this," he said, pale under the monitor's glow. He pulled up the live feed from the park's cameras. Most showed empty walkways, motionless rides, the usual. But on camera 12, the one pointed at the Ferris wheel, there was movement. At first, I thought it was a glitch, a faint blur of light near the base, like fog shifting. But then the Ferris wheel moved, one rotation, then another, the same impossible heavy groan I'd heard before. Leon turned up the volume, and through the static came a faint looping sound, a child's laugh. Then a man's voice again. "Keep your hands inside the carriage." Tessa swore under her breath and pulled the power cord from the wall. The screen went black. She said, "That's how it starts. First the cameras, then the lights, then someone goes missing." Earl just nodded. "Who's on cleanup at the carousel tonight?" "Milo," I said. All 3 of them looked at each other, then ran. We found Milo standing in the middle of the carousel platform, broom in hand, staring up. The horses were moving, slowly in rhythm, as if something invisible was riding them. Their painted mouths opened and closed with soft wooden creaks. The air smelled like burned sugar and ozone. "Milo!" I shouted, grabbing his arm. His eyes were wide and glassy, pupils blown out. He whispered, "She asked if I wanted to play." We dragged him off the platform, and as soon as his feet hit the pavement, the carousel stopped. The music cut off mid-note. The silence that followed felt heavy, thick, alive. Leon swore, "That's it. I'm done. I'm not dying for $12 an hour." But Tessa shook her head. "You can't quit now, not if she's noticed you." That's when I realized every one of them, Earl, Tessa, Leon, had their own story. Something that happened on the night shift. They were all just waiting for me to get mine. After the carousel night, everything changed. The park didn't feel like a workplace anymore. It felt like a living thing watching us. The lights flickered, even during daylight maintenance checks, and the air carried this faint smell of ozone, like the second before lightning hits. I tried not to think about it. But curiosity's a sickness. It eats at you. One morning, when the sun was barreling up and the mist still hugged the rides, I went back to the Ferris wheel. I told myself I just wanted to prove it was all in my head, that it didn't move without power, that the voices were my imagination. The platform was damp with dew. My boots left perfect prints on the metal. And that's when I saw them. Coins. Dozens of them, scattered across the loading area like someone had spilled a handful of change and walked away. But when I crouched down, I realized they weren't normal coins. They were brass, worn smooth, each one stamped on the one side with "one ride." On the other side was a date. Most were from the 90s, around the time of the fire, but a few were newer, 2010, 2014, 2019, and one at the very edge of the platform, had this year's date, 2025. I turned it over and froze. My name was carved in it. Not printed, carved, hand-etched in shaky, uneven lines. Luke. My breath hitched. Nobody in town knew me well enough to do that. I'd only moved here 3 months ago. I pocketed the token and stood, my pulse thudding in my ears. From up close, I noticed something else. The Ferris wheel's carriages weren't numbered in sequence anymore. They jumped 1, 2, 5, 9, 9, 9. The same number repeating, painted over again and again, like the others had been erased. When I told Earl about the coins later, he didn't even pretend to be surprised. "You shouldn't have touched it," he said, rubbing his temples. "They're markers." "Markers for what?" "For who's next." He told me that years ago, before the fire, the ride operator, Daisy's father, had this ritual. Every kid who rode got a brass token. He kept a logbook, neat handwriting, all the names and dates. But after the fire, they found his body in the control shack, hand still clutching a coin that wasn't on the list. His own. That's when he looked me straight in the eyes and asked, "You didn't keep it, did you?" I lied. Said I threw it away. That night, I dreamed of Carriage 9 swinging high above the dark park. Someone was inside, holding out a small brass coin, whispering, "You already paid." When I woke up, my hand was clenched tight around something cold. The token, polished now, clean, like it had never touched dirt. After that dream, I stopped pretending I could walk away. Whatever was happening in that park, it had my name on it now, literally. The next night, I stayed late under the pretense of fixing a jammed trash compactor. When the last of the rides powered down and the night crew clocked out, I slipped toward the Ferris wheel. The fog was heavier than usual, clinging low to the ground like smoke. The air had that metallic scent again, ozone and something sweeter, faintly burnt, like sugar melting too long on a stove. The control shack loomed ahead, still locked, still padlocked, still impossible. But when I touched the handle this time, it clicked. Not rust breaking, just unlocking. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with dust and engine grease. The control board sat just as I'd seen it before, rows of labeled switches, and that single one marked Daisy in trembling handwriting. The light above it glowed faintly red, even though the park's power was supposed to be off. On the operator's desk lay a small leather-bound book. The cover was singed at the corners, the title faded but still legible. Ride Log, Hollow Hills Amusement, Ferris Division. I hesitated before touching it. The leather was warm, almost feverish. The first few pages were what you'd expect. Dates, names, times. June 10, 1996, Daisy M., Carriage 9. June 10, 1996, power failure, emergency stop. After that, the entries continued. 1999, 2003, 2014. Then came the more recent ones. I read faster, my breath catching as I saw familiar names. Leon T., 2019. Tessa W., 2021. Milo R., 2024. And below them, one fresh line, written in neat, smudgeless ink. LUKEH, 2025, pending. My vision blurred. Pending? Before I could process it, I heard the faint scrape of metal from outside, like boots on the ride's platform. I snapped the book shut and turned off my flashlight. The sound grew clearer, footsteps circling the Ferris wheel, slow, measured, wet against the steel. Peering through the window, I saw shapes moving in the fog. 4 figures. Standing in a circle beneath the Ferris wheel. Earl, Leon, Tessa, Milo. Except Milo had been gone for a week. His mom said he'd quit. They stood completely still, heads tilted up at Carriage 9. I tried calling out, but my voice caught in my throat. Then, as if sensing me, all 4 turned toward the shack in perfect unison. Their eyes reflected the red light from the switch labeled Daisy. I stumbled back, knocking over the chair, and hit the wall. The switch flipped itself down with a sharp click. The Ferris wheel roared to life. The entire structure groaned, lights bursting awake one by one, spinning faster and faster until it was a blur of gold and shadow. The fog pulsed with every rotation, rippling like waves. I pressed against the window, terrified, mesmerized, until I saw her, in Carriage 9, small, still, hair fluttering in the wind like ribbons, and beside her, an empty seat, waiting. The intercom crackled again, louder this time. Next rider, Luke Harrison, please step aboard. I dropped the logbook, but before it hit the floor, a final page flipped open on its own. There, scrawled across the bottom in fresh black ink, ride complete.
I didn't sleep after that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the Ferris wheel turning, slow, mechanical, and steady, like it was winding something deep inside my chest. By morning, I'd convinced myself to quit for real. I'd drive out of Maple Hollow, leave the key in the mailbox, and never look back. But when I got to the park gates, there were barricades, police tape, and the sheriff's car. A deputy stopped me before I could even park. "Park's closed today," he said. "Flooding hazard." I laughed, because that didn't make sense. The lake behind the park had been dry since before I moved here. Just a cracked basin full of weeds and tire tracks. But then I saw it through the trees. Silver water, glinting where dirt used to be. It had filled overnight. By noon, the surface shimmered like glass, still and unnatural. The park staff said nothing, just stood by the fences watching the water rise, as if waiting for something to come out of it. I found Earl near the bumper cars, smoking like he was trying to burn the air itself. "You see the lake?" I asked. He nodded without looking at me. "Yeah, it's back." "Back?" He sighed, flicking his cigarette into a puddle. "That lake feeds from underground springs, or it used to. After the fire, they drained it to dig for the bodies. Found her dress, a few bones, a ride token wedged in the mud, but not the wheel car that fell in." I froze. Carriage 9 fell into the lake? Earl looked at me finally, eyes wet, tired, maybe a little scared. "They said it sank with the operator inside. He tried to save her, but the cables snapped." I remembered the voice on the intercom, the way he said my name. That night, I went to the edge of the property, where the chain-link fence met the water line. The lake was nearly full, the reflection of the Ferris wheel perfect in the surface, every light, every carriage. Except in the reflection, one of them was moving. Carriage 9, rotating slowly beneath the surface. And there was sound. At first I thought it was the wind through the trees, but it was coming from below the water. Low, rhythmic, metallic, like chains tightening, gears turning underwater. Each groan echoed through the ground, vibrating up through my shoes. I aimed my flashlight toward the reflection, but instead of the beam cutting through the water, it bent, like the surface wasn't water at all, but a mirror made of smoke. Then something broke through, just for a second. A pale hand, small, childlike, wet hair tangled around it as it reached up, palm open, asking. I stumbled back, fell into the mud. When I looked again, the hand was gone. The lake was still. But on the shore, right where I'd been standing, something waited in the dirt. A brass coin. One ride. The date wasn't 2025 this time. It was tomorrow's.
The sheriff said the park would be temporarily closed for safety inspection. That was the official story, but everyone in town knew better. By then, half the night crew had stopped showing up. Leon's trailer was found abandoned at the edge of Route 6, engine still running, driver's door wide open, radio tuned to static. Tessa left a voicemail for Earl saying she was heading west and never wanted to see that wheel again. Only Earl and I came back. I don't know why he did. Maybe guilt, maybe duty. Me? I needed answers. The park was dead quiet under a cloudy sky. No rides, no lights, no children's laughter spilling from the speakers. Just that uneasy hum, the kind that makes your bones ache, like the air pressure before a storm. Earl met me by the control shack. He looked rough, eyes sunken, hands shaking as he fumbled with his thermos. "Got word from the county. They're draining the lake again tomorrow. Said the Ferris wheel's foundation's unstable." "Good," I said. "Let it sink." He didn't answer right away. Just stared past me at the ride, now black against the storm clouds. "You don't get it," he said finally. It doesn't sink. It waits. The words hung there. Around midnight, the wind picked up. Somewhere across the park, a loose sign clanged against metal, the sound sharp and lonely. I walked toward the Ferris wheel, even though every instinct told me not to. The lake behind it shimmered with that same unnatural glow, the reflection brighter than the wheel itself. The water looked alive, rippling without wind, pulsing faintly to a rhythm I could almost feel in my chest. Then the intercom crackled to life. It was the same voice as before, the operator. "Final ride of the season," it said, slow and distorted like a recording warped by time. "One more seat, one more name." The lights along the Ferris wheel flickered on, one by one, until only Carriage 9 burned gold. It began to spin, faster, the groan of its gears rising into a howl. Earl shouted, "Get back!" But I couldn't move. The air vibrated, the ground shook beneath my boots. The lake started to boil, literal steam rising as bubbles burst from below. And over the roar, I heard her. Daisy, the same small, echoing laugh I'd heard on the carousel weeks ago. I turned to run and froze. Earl was standing by the operator's booth, his hand hovering over the red switch labeled Daisy. He looked at me, eyes glassy. "She's been calling him home," he said quietly. "Every year, one more soul to help him keep it turning." Before I could stop him, he flipped the switch. The Ferris wheel screamed. That's the only word for it. A mechanic wail, metal crying like something alive. Every bulb flared white, then burst. The wind hit hard enough to throw me backward. I hit the ground, my ears ringing. When I looked up again, Earl was gone. The shock door hung open, hinges bent, empty. And the Ferris wheel was turning on its own. No lights, no power, no sound but the steady creak of metal and the splash of something dragging in the water below. Then, as it slowed, I saw him. A man sitting in carriage 9, one arm around a little girl. Both smiling, both looking down at me. The intercom clicked once more. Ride complete. The lights went dark.
The next morning, Maple Hollow looked like a ghost town. In the stillness, sirens, searchlights, reporters, the kind of noise small towns aren't built to handle. Sheriff Collins stood at the park gate with a clipboard on a hollow stair, telling every journalist the same line. "We're treating this as a workplace accident." But there wasn't much left to investigate. The Ferris wheel wasn't turning anymore, but its shape looked wrong, tilted slightly toward the lake, as if something beneath it had shifted. A few carriages hung uneven, chains slack, like loose teeth. The air still smelled like burnt ozone, the scent you get after a lightning strike. They found my flashlight halfway buried in mud near the control shack. No sign of Earl. No sign of his truck either. The sheriff pulled me aside for questioning. I told him everything, the coins, the lights, the logbook. Every word felt insane coming out of my mouth, but he just listened quietly, tapping his pen against his notes. When I mentioned the name Daisy, his hand paused. "Daisy Monroe," he said softly. "You know that name?" I nodded. "The girl from the fire." He shook his head. "No, son. Daisy Monroe wasn't from here. The girl who died in that fire was named Daisy Holt."
He flipped open his old case file and turned the paper toward me. There was a faded photo, a little girl in a checkered dress standing next to a man in a Ferris wheel operator's uniform. The name under it read Earl Holt. I must have gone cold because the sheriff put a hand on my shoulder. "You said you worked with an Earl. What's his last name?" I couldn't answer. They searched the whole park for him that afternoon. Nothing. No footprints, no jacket, no cigarette butts, and the control shack was empty except for a single brass coin sitting on the switchboard. One ride. Date: the day before. By evening, they brought in floodlights to start draining the lake. The pumps groaned, churning mud and bubbles to the surface. Around midnight, one of the workers called out, said something was rising from the water. It wasn't a body. It was metal. A Ferris wheel carriage, half rusted, covered in weeds. Number 9. They pulled it up inch by inch, water streaming from the windows. When the crane set it down on the grass, I saw something inside, small, dull, golden. A pile of coins, hundreds of them, each one stamped one ride, each one bearing a name: Leon, Tessa, Milo, and at the very top, freshly etched into the metal, Earl Holt. One of the deputies lifted a coin to his flashlight and frowned. These look new, like they were minted yesterday. Sheriff Collins just looked at me. "You said there was one with your name, right?" I nodded, reached into my pocket to show him. Except it wasn't there anymore. Only a damp circle in my jeans and the faint smell of rust.
The county shut the park down for good. They welded the gates, posted no trespassing signs, even hired security to keep thrill seekers out. The local paper ran a story about faulty foundations and historic instability, but everyone in Maple Hollow knew that wasn't why. For weeks after, I kept driving by. The ride sat frozen in the cold autumn air, colors fading more each day. But the Ferris wheel, it was just gone. No demolition, no transport trucks, no trace. Just empty space and a circular imprint of crushed grass and steel bolts. The sheriff told me it must have collapsed into the lake again, pulled under by unstable soil. I wanted to believe that, I really did, but I couldn't stop thinking about that voice on the intercom. Ride complete. A week later, I left town. I told myself it was temporary, just until I could get my head straight. I rented a room 2 states over, took a warehouse job, tried to live like a normal person again. But every time the wind howled at night, I swore I could hear faint calliope music bleeding through the sound. Then, one morning, on my drive to work, I saw it. In the distance, beyond the highway, through the fog and the flat farmland, a Ferris wheel. Smaller, maybe. Newer paint, different name, Lakeside Fun Fair. But the shape, the exact same structure, the same long spokes, the same crooked symmetry, and high near the top, a single carriage was lit gold in the gray daylight. I almost drove off the road. That night, I checked the news. The fair had opened 3 days ago. Family-owned, traveling across state lines, they'd been in Maple Hollow last summer, right before it reopened. I called the number listed online for ride inquiries. A cheerful woman answered. Her voice trembled just slightly, like she'd said the same lines too many times. "Hi, thanks for calling Lakeside Fun Fair. Would you like to reserve a private ride?" "No," I managed. "I just wanted to ask, who operates the Ferris wheel?" There was a long pause on the other end. Then, in a tone so low I almost missed it, she said, "He said your name already."
click. The next day, I drove out there. Couldn't stop myself. The fair was smaller than Hollow Hills, just a cluster of lights and tents around a big red wheel. Kids running, popcorn smell thick in the air, normal, almost comforting. But when I got closer, the crowd noise began to fade. The laughter dimmed, replaced by that slow, rhythmic creak. Carriage 9 was glowing again, and just under it a sign nailed to the ticket booth read, "One ride per soul, no refunds." A man stood at the booth window. His face was shadowed, but I'd have known that voice anywhere. "Evenin', Luke," he said softly. "Been waitin' on you." It was Earl, or what used to be him. His skin looked sunburned and pale all at once, his eyes reflecting light that wasn't there. "You said the ride was over," I whispered. He smiled, slow, tired, almost kind. "Son, it never ends. The wheel just keeps turnin'. Only question is, which way you're goin'." Behind him, the Ferris wheel began to spin, slowly at first, then faster. Each rotation shimmered against the night sky until I couldn't tell where the lights ended and the stars began. I took a step back, and then another. But when I looked down, something glinted in the dirt by my boot. A brass token. One ride. Date, today. I picked it up before I could stop myself. It was warm. When I looked back up, the fairground was empty. No children, no lights, no sound. Just the Ferris wheels standing silent in the middle of a dark field. Carriage 9 swung gently in the wind, and from somewhere inside, a child's voice whispered, "Your turn." And that's where I'll leave it. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear that old music in the distance. It's faint, but steady. And when I check the news, there's always another small town carnival setting up somewhere nearby. Always with a Ferris wheel. Always with one golden carriage. The ride never ends. It just waits for the next name.